for you this afternoon. But first, let's take a look at the highlights.
President jets back from Ethiopia, where he led an onslaught against the International Criminal Court. Under siege Supreme Court Judge Philip Tunoi, probe begins as he seeks to clear his name. And KDFs urge to stay put in Somalia and take on the Al-Shabaab.
Well, many thanks, and my name is Abi Agina. Let's bring you up to speed with the latest. President Uhuru Kenyatta this morning arrived back in the country from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where he attended the 26th African Union Summit. The president was received at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport by, among others, leaders Deputy President William Ruto. During the AU Summit, the continental body approved, without any amendments, a proposal by President Uhuru Kenyatta to develop a roadmap for withdrawal from the Rome Statute, the treaty that established the International Criminal Court. Uhuru, in his proposal, accused the ICC of pursuing weak and politicized cases. He asked the AU to reaffirm that the global standard for the immunity for heads of state should also apply to Africa. Uhuru also reached out to the 54-member bloc to insist on the termination of the case against his deputy, William Ruto, who is facing crimes against humanity at the ICC. Well, from that story of the president jetting back, we now want to keep you up to tabs with what's happening at the judiciary, where Justice Tunoi probe is actually underway at the moment. And we do have our reporter, Rita Tinina, who will bring us up to speed. Rita, good afternoon. If you can hear me, what's the latest from the judiciary?
Well, a very good afternoon to you. As you mentioned there, that special committee, the session is still underway. It began shortly after 11 a.m. Justice Philip Tunoi arriving here at the Supreme Court, accompanied by his lawyers Fred Ngatia and Firoz Noroji. This is a session that is being conducted in the CJ's boardroom, the boardroom for the Chief Justice, which is on the ground floor of the Supreme Court building. We don't know yet what the committee has focused on today, but we understand yesterday Justice Tunoi spent the better part of the day consulting with his legal team. Of course, he's facing allegations that he received a 200 million shilling bribe from Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero to rule in his favor in an election petition filed by Ferdinand Waititu over the governorship of Nairobi. And some analysts say he might try to focus on the credibility of his accuser. Geoffrey Kiplagat has sworn an affidavit saying that he was the go-between Justice Philip Tunoi and Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero. He might try to focus on the credibility of his accuser. Last week we spoke to Justice Tunoi, and he says he's just being set up. This is about the succession wars in the Supreme Court. Right now, Chief Justice Dr. Willy Mutunga is set to retire in June this year. Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal is also set to retire. She is challenging her retirement age. But if the Chief Justice were to retire and the Deputy Chief Justice, Justice Philip Tunoi himself is also challenging his retirement age, but he is the senior most judge in the Supreme Court. And in the absence of the Chief Justice, in the absence of the Deputy Chief Justice, he would be taking over the position of Chief Justice in an acting capacity. And his argument last week was that electing a new or appointing a new Chief Justice is a matter that takes a lengthy period of time. And he might be acting Chief Justice until after the 2017 general election. And he says some forces, he didn't mention which ones, he says they're uncomfortable with him being the acting Chief Justice by the time the general election is being held, just in case there is a presidential election petition. Justice Tunoi has denied ever meeting his accuser, Geoffrey Kiplagat, or Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero. So as I mentioned, we don't know yet what has transpired during this morning session. We will be keeping an eye on things for you. Justice Tunoi is a man who has been in the judiciary for close to 3 decades, rising through the ranks. He started as a Puni judge, which is a junior judge, when he was appointed judge of the High Court. He served as High Court judge for 18 years before he served as High Court judge for 6 years before he was elevated to the Court of Appeal, where he has served as an appellate judge for 18 years before he went to the Supreme Court. And now, aside from this case, this bribery allegations against him, he had filed another application challenging his retirement age. Him and the High Court judge, Justice Onyancha, are challenging their retirement age, arguing that they were appointed before the 2010 Constitution came into effect. But now Justice Onyancha seems to have thrown in the towel. He says he has chosen to retire. He is taking a leave before even that case is heard. So the limelight on the retirement age in the Supreme Court is entirely on Justice Philip Tunoi when it comes to judges who are challenging their retirement based on the fact that they were appointed before the 2010 Constitution. Rawal's case is a bit different. She was appointed Deputy Chief Justice 3 years after the new Constitution came into effect. So on that matter of the retirement age right now, the spotlight with the choice by Justice Onyancha to retire, the spotlight when it comes to the retirement age of judges who were appointed before the 2010 Constitution came into place is entirely on Justice Philip Tunoi. Add that to his current case over the bribery allegations, even further shines the spotlight on him. Abi.
Many thanks there, Rita, for that comprehensive update regarding that developing story around the probe that Kenyans are waiting to get answers on this particular matter, where a High Court Judge, Philip Tunoi, is allegedly accused of receiving actually 200 million. He is a Supreme Court judge. Of course, we'll continue to update you on that story and what sort of implications are likely to come out of it. And moving on, the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee is expected to probe the procurement process of the Chief Justice William Mutunga's official residence, which is estimated to have cost taxpayers some 310 million shillings. The Kieni MP, Kanini Kega, says Chief Justice William Mutunga's house that was purchased in 2013 at a cost of 310 million shillings has not been occupied. The MP said that the Chief Justice has been living in a rented house at the expense of the taxpayers. Kega alleged that the Chief Justice's house needs 100 million shillings for repairs, despite the fact that it has never been occupied.
The Chief Justice, in 2013, there was a house that was purchased for him at a cost of 310 million shillings. Up to this point, the Chief Justice has never occupied that house in Runda. And of course, he has been living in a house that is rented using taxpayers' money. Right now, they're asking for almost 100 million shillings for repair of upgrading the same house. Two issues. One, there is no house in Runda that can cost 310 million shillings. And we raised that issue in the Public Accounts Committee. We even invited Mutunga himself, the Chief Justice. We did not invite him as the Chief Justice, but we invited him as the chair of the Judicial Service Commission. He refused to come. He said that he cannot come because he is the head of an arm of government. But we were calling him to come and shed more light as the chair of the Judicial Service Commission. He refused. But now we have a report, which of course will be made public.
And now to that all-important debate around whether Kenyan troops should stay in Somalia. Parliament's Budget Committee Chair Mutava Musyimi maintains that the Kenya Defence Forces should remain in Somalia. Musyimi said that the motion to take the force to the neighboring country Somalia was tabled before the 10th Parliament and was passed unanimously. He said that the decision to allow KDF operate in Somalia was the decision of the Parliament and not the President alone, and that none of the members of the whole House have ever brought another motion either to amend or nullify the idea.
So the best form of attack is defensive. The best form of defense is actually offensive, to be on the offensive. And I think that's why we chose to be on the offensive and to go where the problem is emanating from. Because it is coming from a state that really didn't exist. Because you know Somalia has had its history since the date of Siad Barre, the former president. And so it's a choice, it's a strategic military choice that was made, which we fully support to this day. We don't think that pulling out our forces from Somalia would necessarily mean that there will be no more attacks here. In fact, in my view, there will be worse.
The Ministry of Water and that of the Environment have struck a deal on how to approach the construction of a multi-billion shilling Keyo Marakwet Dam project. The project, which is one of the flagship of 18 other projects to be launched countrywide, was at the center of a row over which ministry was to run it. The two ministers spoke early today after meeting Elgeyo Marakwet leaders.
We are more than excited when, as a county, we have projects that are taking place there which are worth more than, in total over, 80 billion or thereabout. It is a privilege for us to have such amount of investment taking place in our county. And we welcome national government to invest. We want them to do it expeditiously.
So going forward, what we want to do is to meet not only with the leaders on the ground, but also with the people on the ground, so that we accelerate and complete this project as was determined in 2009.
Implementing agency of this project remains the KVDA, and there is no wrangling or fighting over this project. We have consulted with the leaders, and the leaders have made it very clear that this project that is of top national priority is equally a priority project for the people of Elgeyo Marakwet.
Some good developments there for consumers and residents alike. We now want to shift gears and cross over to Tanzania in Arusha, where Timothy Otieno is covering the East Africa Legislative Assembly Summit, which kicked off earlier on in the week. And Timothy, if you can hear me, just bring us up to speed on so far what's happening at the summit. Seems we have lost him, but we'll catch up with him later on. Well, moving on, the Kenya Alliance of Resident Association has decried the executive's encroachment of the constitution by introducing bills which undermine its implementation. Speaking at the association's 47th bi-monthly talk, attended by former ethics boss John Githongo and Ruaraka Member of Parliament and also a member of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, Tom Kajwang, they said there is a deliberate attempt by the government to water down the constitution through legislative and administrative interventions by the executive arm of government.
36 amendments, I can't remember, but through judicial interpretation, and especially at the level of the Supreme Court. Yes, there have been some very significant amendments to end slavery and so on and so forth, and at one point abolishing alcohol and then removing that abolition and so on. But judicial interpretation is extremely important in any system which the Kenyan system now does have a Supreme Court.
Is that we now have 47 devolved units around the country with a very strong stake in this current constitution, with all its imperfections. We have devolved corruption, we've devolved a lot of naughty things, but when you go into the counties, there's also 51 of the east.
Timothy, we seem to have some technicalities with that particular connection, but we'll cross over later on to you. But many thanks for that update regarding the East Africa Legislative Assembly Summit happening in Arusha in Tanzania. We'll be giving you more details after this quick commercial break. Thereafter, we'll also be telling you on what's happening from the sports world. Don't go too far.